In this video, we're going to cover 9 insanely powerful Hyrox hacks. Hacks that can help you start training smarter or help you with an existing program that you're currently running. It doesn't matter what level you're at, what experience you're at, or what category you're competing in. These are universal principles of strength and conditioning that are going to help you take your athletic potential and your Hyrox training and your competing to that next level. My name's Steve Collins, an online health and performance coach. Let's dive in. Okay, so I've broken these 9 hacks or tips down into 3 categories: planning, peaking, and competing. Up first for planning, you need to understand the strength and conditioning trifecta of injury prevention, testing, and training frequency. 90% of your training success and competitive success will be dependent on these 3 things. Your ability to stay injury-free so you can train hard and consistently, which is done through structural balance and creating robustness. Up next, you need to understand your current training level, which means you need to do some testing, know where you're at. And then lastly, thirdly, you need to know how much time and training frequency you can commit to on a weekly basis so that you know what you're working with. And if there were 2 words to live by when you were starting, it would be to not overtrain. Think about it this way: the majority of programs out there are cookie cutter made. They're just not individualized enough. There are lots of things and variables to think about. Absolute strength, relative strength, heart rate zones, heart rate abilities, recovery ability, injuries, movement skill, capacities, and a ton more. If these things aren't factored into your training and your preparation, most likely you will break down, get injured, whether that's soft tissue or stress fractures or whatever. You're going to break down, you're going to get injured, you're going to get niggles. The testing then allows you to know exactly where you're at. And from there, you can reverse engineer the preparation for the competition so that everything is planned accordingly to your own unique needs: strength, power, fitness, skill, and all the rest. And you know where you need to spend your time at different points during the preparation. And then lastly, knowing how many days a week you can commit to training will give you your training frequency. This is important because, say from your testing, you work out that you need to increase your aerobic capacity, your conditioning, whilst increasing your overall relative strength levels because you may struggle pushing or pulling the sled. You will have to manipulate your training over the year, over the preparation that you go for, and manipulate the energy systems so that you get different adaptations at different points to allow you to peak. And that's really important because, for example, if you are trying to work on that strength and power side of things whilst trying to improve your aerobic conditioning, those are competing energy systems, and you ain't going to maximize and optimize both when you're training and maximally at the same time. So different phases, different weeks, you're going to have to periodize and stress one more so than the other, and then it should all come together. So overtraining occurs far too often in Hyrox. Firstly, because none of these programs get you doing any testing. And secondly, they do too much volume, whether that's too much running volume or too much WODs and Hyrox based workouts, or far too many sessions over the week. Now, unless you are a full-time athlete, don't have children, don't have a partner, don't work, then maybe you'll get away with that. But chances are you don't. So more than likely you will overtrain, you will get injured, you will do too much unnecessary work. And if you can get away with doing all that work, chances are you will break down over time. Whether that's physically or mentally, you're going to overtrain. Tip number 2 is to plan accordingly. Success in Hyrox is all about knowing when your competition is and then reverse engineering your training plan backwards. For me personally, I like my athletes to have at least 12 to 16 weeks in preparation for the competition. And when they get to about 8 to 12 weeks, they may have one competition where they can test themselves, push themselves, put everything together just as a trial run. So say you're 12 weeks out, I write up a periodization plan that will have all your competition dates in there, all your training weeks, all your training phases in there. When we prioritize skills, aerobic capacity, aerobic power, aerobic speed, strength, power, nutrition, everything else. By doing this, it gives me and the athlete a clear plan on what we need to work on and when. This creates athlete buy-in, trust, and ultimately gives us a program with zero fluff and unnecessary work, which means the athlete will not be overtraining and getting injured. Tip number 3 is a big one, and I'm telling you, it will turn you into a machine 10 times faster than what most people experience. And I promise after this one, we're onto the training stuff. Hire a coach, a good quality coach. Now, there's nothing wrong with going into Hyrox, enjoying yourself, training hard for it, But ultimately, if you're anything like me or any of the athletes that I work with, you're competitive in nature and you want to do as best you can. You want to optimize your health, your performance, and your competition. What's the point in training as hard as you can, as much as you can, and not seeing the best results that you can see possible? This is where hiring a coach is really useful. A coach will give you a plan. They will periodize and organize your training properly for you, depending on what you need to work on and what attributes you feel that you need to work on. So hire a coach who has a track record, not just a coach who competes in Hyrox. Someone who has worked with fairly decent level athletes and has a good track record of getting results. Okay, enough of the tips on planning. Let's get into the actual tips on training. These hacks are all about making your training more effective and increasing your athletic potential so that you can train harder, recover better, and smash your Hyrox race. If you're looking for a more specific training on the cardiovascular side of things, maybe developing your anaerobic conditioning or your aerobic conditioning, then click somewhere up here. There's a video where we dive into the technical aspect of conditioning. Okay, so first up, you need to choose your main lower body bilateral movement. Now, if you're anything like me, you love to squat. However, you need to choose the squat that works best for you. Is it the front squat? Is it the back squat? Is it the high bar, low bar? Lots of variations to choose from. Once you know what works best for you, learn how to perfect the technique, the start position, and the actual position that you have to go through. Other bilateral lifts include deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, good mornings, leg presses. I like my athletes to do the front squat early on in their preparation with a real slow tempo and a real deep range of motion. As they get closer to their competition, we shorten the range of motion. That will allow them to lift more weight and move the weight faster at shorter ranges of motion, therefore creating more speed, more power. This is directly linked to tip number 5, which is to have a general preparatory phase and a specific phase. Generally, a general prep phase is all about ironing out those muscular imbalances, those weak muscle groups, building an aerobic base and creating robustness and resilience where it's needed. It could even mean for some working on sprinting and running mechanics and strength foundations. Very importantly, during this general prep phase, we want to work on large ranges of motion. So for a beginner, that could be a deep full range of motion back squat. For someone who's a little bit more intermediate to advanced, that could be a full clean with a squat. As competition approaches, a transition over to a specific phase is needed where the goal is to create a foundation to peak for power. This involves more dynamic, faster based movements, shorter ranges of motion such as power cleans, power snatches, partial squats. Personally, I like my athletes to use the GPP phase to get a better body composition, so lose body fat, build some muscle tissue, and overall develop their levels of strength. And we do this by using many exercise variations for the whole body. It could be kettlebell single arm carries, it could be trap bar carries, it could be Zercher front squats, Zercher good mornings, and many other things. The key here is to control volume, tempo, and rest periods. By controlling those 3 things, it will allow you to progressively overload. Remember, the rest periods are really important because controlling a rest period will dictate the hormonal response you get from training. Controlling your tempo will allow you to create enough time under tension to get the body composition changes that we need. And controlling volume will allow for progressive overload to occur whilst controlling overtraining. So working on muscular imbalances and creating a solid foundation is way more important than just doing long runs all the time, hard workouts, WODs, and just doing reps after reps. Remember, quality over quantity. PS, I offer 90 days of online coaching for anyone who wants to train smart, apply simple and flexible nutritional strategies, and take their athletic potential to that next level. Up next, we have the 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto Principle. The Pareto Principle states that roughly 80% of our results come from 20% of our actions. And this is really super important for any of you who are intermediate to the advanced. You see, when we first start training, we progress generally quite fast. And that's because a newbie gains. And scientifically speaking, when you are a beginner, you have a larger window of adaptation. And as we get more intermediate to advanced, this window of adaptation becomes smaller, which means our training and our approach needs to be smarter. Usually, the intermediate to advanced level athlete has done years of lots of running, lots of hard workouts, and generally lots of work to get to where they are. And they think that to get to that next level, they need to do even more and work even harder, when in fact, Less is more. Most things in strength and conditioning are not equally distributed. And if athletes are thinking that to get better, they need to do more time-consuming runs, more WODs, more harder workouts to get to that next level, it will lead to lower and lower results, which we call the law of diminishing returns. So remember, 80% of the results that you get come from 20% of the work in the gym. Focus on time-efficient plans and training schedules that will equal or better your results. But most importantly, your restoration and recovery, because you can only train as hard and as much as your body can recover. Common signs of overtraining are decreased motivation, elevated resting heart rate, low heart rate variability, illness, infection, muscle soreness, decreased appetite, moodiness, irritable, can't sleep, increased perceived effort, decline in performance, persistently fatigued, and the need for coffee or pre-workouts. Onto the competition category of tips. Tip number 7, focus on pacing. Live and die by the 5-second rule. It's probably apparent already, but not going overkill matters. Hyrox has runs, rows, and ski ergs that you can control and monitor your pace with your watch or on the display. So the more you learn about how to pace, your body will reward itself with momentum, rhythm, and energy conservation. Developing insanely good pacing is one of the many reasons why the top level athletes are the top level athletes. You literally cannot see a lot of them guys have a drop off with their pacing, which is why they're at the level they're at. Now, if we can follow the 5-second rule on our rows, ski ergs, and runs, we'll be able to build to this level too. The 5-second rule. All you have to do is during your competition, you have to keep within a 5-second buffer of your training splits. So if you go into your competition knowing that you can consistently run 4-minute Ks, when you do your competition, have a buffer of 5 seconds. So your fastest run could be 3:55 and your slowest run could be 4:05. Especially if at the start, when everyone goes out really fast and you look down at your watch and you're running 3:30s. It's too fast. You're going to get too taxed, and by the second, third run, you're going to be gone. So don't get tempted by all the other competitors during your competition. So stay in control and use the 5-second rule. This is why it's important to train and understand your limitations and your ability so that come race day, you know the paces that you have to maintain. Tip number 8 is to hydrate. Avoid or delay dehydration by drinking between 125 up to 250 ml during exercise or every 20 minutes or so. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more you sweat, the more you will have to drink. However, don't be guided by thirst, because this is not a good indicator of hydration levels. Studies show that you can maintain optimal performance if you can replace 80% of the water lost during your exercise or maintain within 1% of body mass, which is perfect because we know that the average sweat rate in Hyrox is about 1% of body weight. And we know a drop in 2% fluid loss can have a decrease in performance. So if you do have a higher sweat rate, get drinking more water. And here's a little tip for post Hyrox race. We know that for every 1 kilo of weight lost during exercise, that's equivalent to about 1 liter of water. And we want to replace that 1 liter of water with 150%. So if you lose 1 kilo, you need to drink 1.5 liters of water. Another subtle but powerful tip coming in at 9 is to carbohydrate load. This method will allow for muscle glycogen stores to increase above normal levels. With more glycogen available, you'll be able to exercise harder for longer without a depletion in energy. And this is really effective for events generally over 90 minutes, but also Hyrox events between 60 to 80 minutes or so. Now, there are various ways to do it, and what I like to do with my guys is to use a modified version of the classical method. It's a 6-day carb load. So 7 days out, you should be tapering your training volume. Day 1, you have your usual diet. Days 2 to 4, you have a moderate carb diet, and days 5 to 7, you have a high carb diet. This type of loading is great when using a taper because it doesn't interfere with training intensity, training volumes, and overall energy and recovery. It will serve you very, very well by helping you improve your endurance. Now, if you're still watching this video, chances are you want to go all in with your training for Hyrox. These hacks will absolutely still help you plan, train, and compete, but you still need to deeply understand the technical aspect of putting it all together. At Stephen Collins Training, I help motivated people who want to train properly and apply true strength and conditioning methods and principles into their plans. It doesn't matter if you have no experience whatsoever. The plan will start from the ground up. After a few days, you'll have your training plan, nutritional plan, you'll have your conditioning days, your recovery days, and all of your daily non-negotiables set up for you. I even have a full training lab with educational content where you can dive into training, nutrition, mindset, and everything else. And of course, an incredible community page where other like-minded individuals share their wins, they share their nutritional recipes, they encourage each other through the training process and towards their goals. Not only that, but everyone stays accountable with support from myself and my team on a weekly basis. This 90 days of coaching is more than I could cover on a short YouTube video. And I love it because it's given to you by me. I consider myself to be one of the top 1% in the industry, in a very saturated industry, but that's nowhere near competitive. I've worked in the industry for over 15 years. I have a master's in sports science, so I like to think I know what I'm talking about. And I have worked with all different level athletes, from amateur all the way to world champions, marathon runners, triathletes, Hyrox athletes, rugby players, football players, ice hockey players, all different types of athletes, and even weekend warriors that just want to get in shape. To find out more information on working with me, there is a link to a form in the description below. Fill it out, let's book a call, and then I can give you all the information on how the training online coaching works. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.